All right, got the spy shit. On my way out.
Brilliant work.
Let's get this little shit!
Should be rewired.
I got those dossiers you wanted.
Right, so we do a simple CTOS contact analysis and work out who's in charge of Zero Day. I'll have it done before you can say Guantanamo.
I'll handle the classified data, thank you very much.
It would be so much faster if I worked with you in order to do this.
The people in these dossiers are connected, but not necessarily complicit. It will take intelligence and expertise to separate the wheat from the chaff. And when I discover something actionable, I will contact you.
He's disconnected. Pleasant fella.
Our lives. Now, as you remember, Bloom announced a new version of the Optic at the recent Tone Conference, but we haven't heard too much about that since due to the dramatic...
I have Malik for you.
All right, put him through.
We have to meet. There's been a complication. I can't access the files you stole.
You what now?
The files are logged, and a moment after we got them, I received this.
Sends signals to your optic nerve and lets you see your emails, take calls, and browse...
Hello, Richard.
...directly as if...
We see you're trying to find us by looking into our associates.
Phone, you've just got the...
That's a good idea.
So
Hope you don't mind if we borrow it.
It's great.
Who was your masked savior, we wonder?
Do you actually think that it's...
I've sent Bagley the coordinates for a meeting. I hope I don't need to explain why this is a priority.
All you have to do is choose who you want to chat to, and they're there, ready to talk. I'm browsing the web...
I've found a potential recruit for you. Drop in a pin on your map.
Sit down at a computer... with an actual keyboard and mouse and type everything out. And my favourite feature is public transport. The Optic, you can just walk straight onto the tube. It even acts as a passport. No longer do I have to dig around and try and find my old paper passport just to travel somewhere. Also, I thought that Optic's marketing strategy, making it free for people, was a stroke of genius.
Genius. Bloom was really calculated when it was doing that. It was pushing this draconian device on us at all. Sure, everybody flocked to it. There was free Wi-Fi and phone plans. That definitely helped, but it wasn't a case of this is a product that you need in your life.
Why do you hate it so much?
It's just the worst because you had to give up your privacy expectations and accept surveillance. It was almost like the government and Bloom didn't even need to make the optic mandatory. Making it mandatory was only to get the last holdouts across the line. If free data didn't convince you, fines and arrests from the state for not having the optic would pretty much be enough.
I mean, what do you mean by privacy problems? No one really talks about that anymore.
They don't talk about it because we don't have any choice when it comes to the optic. Yes, it's convenient and mandatory, but everybody's forgotten what it really means. Here, you've got...
No, don't get up. I need a high-ranking SIRS officer's biometrics, eyes and fingers.
Nah, mate, I haven't got time for your... You got a ball, Bagley.
I suggest you begin your relationship with the SIRS Home Office liaison the way you would with anyone, by meticulously poring over every detail of their life and hunting them down.
Go on.
The SIRS Home Office liaison is the bridge between the government and its intelligence service. Their office at Downing Street would be a good place to start your relationship.
That's where we're going, then. Commandeering in the name of DedSec.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of The Upload. We're talking about the optic and how it's changed our lives. Now, as you remember, Bloom announced a
Auto drive.
mention of the Optic at the recent Tone conference, but we haven't heard too much about that since
Auto
due
drive
to
now
dramatic
enabled.
events there. Let's cast our minds back and consider the technology. I mean, the Optic changed everything. It lets you see things in AR. You no longer need a smartphone. You just have the small implant that sends signals to your optic nerve and lets you see your emails, take calls, and browse the internet directly as if it's in front of your eyes. Instead of having to carry around a phone, you've just got the small handheld unit. So much lighter and so much more convenient. It's great.
Vicky, you sound like you absolutely love the Optic. Do you actually think that it's made our lives any better?
I mean, sure, it's definitely made things a lot easier. It's so simple to call someone now. All you have to do is choose who you want to chat to, and they're there, ready to talk. And browsing the web is so much easier. I remember when you used to have to sit down at a computer with an actual keyboard and mouse and type everything out. And my favourite feature is public transport. With the Optic, you can just walk straight onto the tube. It even acts as a passport. No longer do I have to dig around and try and find my old paper passport just to travel somewhere. Also, I thought that Optic's marketing strategy, making it free for people, was a stroke of genius.
Genius. Bloom was really calculated when it was doing that. It was pushing this draconian device on us at all. Sure, everybody flocked to it. There was free Wi-Fi and phone plans. That definitely helped, but it wasn't a case of this is a product that you need in your life.
Why do you hate it so much?
It's just the worst because you had to give up your privacy expectations and accept surveillance. It was almost like the government and Bloom didn't even need to make the Optic mandatory. Making it mandatory was only to get the last holdouts across the line. If free data didn't convince you, fines and arrests from the state for not having... and the Optic would pretty much be enough.
Auto drive now
Privacy
disabled.
problems. No one really talks about that anymore.
They don't talk about it because we... Don't have any choice when it comes to the optic. Yes, it's convenient and but everybody's forgotten what it really means. Here, you've got a whole company owning basically all the data about your life. Bloom can see everything that you can see. Nothing is private anymore. There are so many times when I don't want anyone to have a clue about where I am, who I'm chatting with, what I'm doing. It's not even dodgy stuff, but I just don't want anybody to blackmail me with this in the future by hacking it. And because of Bloom's contracts with the government, it isn't just Bloom that can see everything I do, it's the government. The UK as a state has become a complete surveillance paradise.
I think you're painting a bit of a bleak picture. It's not all that bad.
No, you're completely wrong on this. I don't want everybody trusting me wherever I'm going around London.
Well, that was simple, even for you. Give me a moment to decipher the security codes.
So, Bagley, what do you have?
Mary Kelly is holding her sale at Hackney Bars. Opened in 1904, it was, as the name implies, a public... In today's more enlightened modern times, it's a slave trading market.
She mentioned foreign investors, so this is big. It means associates, clients, employees, anyone remotely involved in an organization. We're taking Mary Kelly down from within.
Inspector Lau wants to take her case against Mary Kelly to a contact in the Attorney General's office, which means gathering as much data as we can to make sure it has the leverage needed for them to prosecute.
The microchips are a huge part of this equation that we know almost nothing about. We need something tangible about these things. See if you can find anything. Blueprints, receipts, samples.
So, the plan is simple. Crash the Kellys' soiree, find out as much as you can, and, minor detail, try not to get killed.
Can't be too careful of the Barnes team. Mary can kill all her captives with the push of a button. If we try to free them now, they're good as dead. She doesn't know we're on to her yet. That gives us the advantage.
Download complete. Now Scarper or they'll kill you for sure. Got it. 16 email threads indicate the Home Office liaison is a right lush. She spends most of her time down at the Three Hawker Boys. If you want to start a relationship with her, that's as good a place as any.
Let's have the coordinates.
Done.
Pissed or what? That's a code for... Get your ass over here, buddy. Right. Alright, let's do this. Won't find anything. Not my business. This is bullshit.
Come on, Mitch. You have a real fucking attitude problem. Do you know that?
Hello and welcome to today's episode of The Upload. We're talking about the Optic and how it's changed our lives. Now, as you remember, Bloom announced a new version of the Optic at the recent Tone conference, but we haven't heard too much about that since due to... dramatic events there.
Auto drive now
Let's
enabled.
cast our minds back and consider the technology. I mean, the Optic changed everything. It lets you see things in AR. You no longer need a smartphone. You just have the small implant that sends signals to your optic nerve and lets you see your emails, take calls, and browse the internet directly as if the screen was in front of your eyes. Instead of having to carry around a phone, you've just got the small handheld unit. So much lighter and so much more convenient. It's great.
Vicky, you sound like you absolutely love the Optic. Do you actually think that it's made our lives any better?
I mean, sure, it's definitely made things a lot easier. It's so simple to call someone now. All you have to do is choose who you want to chat to, and they're there, ready to talk. And browsing the web is so much easier. I remember when you used to have to sit down at a computer with an actual keyboard and mouse and type everything out. And my favourite feature is public transport. With the Optic, you can just walk straight onto the tube. It even acts as a passport. No longer do I have to dig around and try and find my old paper passport just to travel somewhere. Also, I thought that Optic's marketing strategy, making it free for people, was a stroke of genius.
Genius. Bloom was really calculated when it was doing that. It was pushing this draconian device on us at all. Sure, everybody flocked to it. There was free Wi-Fi and phone plans. That definitely helped, but it wasn't a case of this is a product that you need in your life.
Why do you hate it so much?
It's just the worst because you had to give up your privacy expectations and accept surveillance. It was almost like the government and Bloom didn't even need to make the Optic mandatory. Making it mandatory was only to get the last holdouts across the line. If free data didn't convince you, fines and arrests from the state for not having the Optic would pretty much be enough.
I mean, what do you mean by privacy problems? No one really talks about that anymore.
They don't talk about it because we don't have any choice when it comes to the Optic. Yes, it's convenient and mandatory, but everybody's forgotten what it really means. Here, you've got a whole company owning basically all the data about your life. Bloom can see everything that you can see. Nothing is private anymore. There are so many times when I don't want anyone to have a clue about where I am, who I'm chatting with, what I'm doing. It's not even dodgy stuff, but I just don't want anybody to blackmail me with this in the future by hacking it. And because of Bloom's contracts with the government, it isn't just Bloom that can see everything I do, it's the government. The UK as a state has become a complete surveillance paradise.
I think you're painting a bit of a bleak picture. It's not all that bad.
No, you're completely wrong on this. I don't want everybody tracking me wherever I'm going around London.
Well, in that case, you might be interested in some rumours I heard. Did you hear that some DedSec hackers have found a way to bypass the Optic's connection with Bloom?
Are they actually making it better or usable or actually friendly for anybody?
Well, word on the street is that they've been able to create an encrypted signal, which means that your world might have a chance of becoming a bit more private again, so you could go back and enjoy all the great things about Optic without that fear of surveillance.
With the Optic, privacy's dead.
Founder.
Smart television sets. Data is collected from voter records. It's collected from how much power do you use in your house and how much water do you use in your house. In pre-crisis Britain, we got really used to all of our services being free. Everything suddenly became free that was digital. But what people forgot is that if you're not paying for it, then you're the product being sold.
If technology brings out the worst in capitalism, capitalism brings out the worst in technology. Senior academic Alfie tells us how big business repurposes big data.
Historically, what's happened, of course, is that people have traded their privacy for their convenience. As smartphones and other kinds of technology came in and became mass-consumed, mass-used items and technological objects, gradually people were so attracted to the affordances of these technologies that privacy kind of retreated into the background and into a state we've got now where it's essentially gone. Having this access to this data makes huge tech companies like Bloom so much more powerful than they would be otherwise, and not just in the obvious ways. Of course, there's a lot of worry and fear over what they can do with the data, can track anyone, find anyone, see what every individual is doing at any point in time. But I think there's even deeper reasons why this data empowers these huge companies to control our society and make us do things. So lots of predictive technologies which are implemented by these tech giants. It's not only interested in knowing what we're going to do, but influencing the patterns of our movement. So technologies might suggest routes to use in the city, places to go, restaurants to go to, cafes to go to, music to listen to. And these suggestions are not just predicting what we might like to do, they're actually influencing the way citizens move, think, eat, meet, and use their city as a space. So London has become a place where a small group of surveillance capitalist companies like Bloom can control the movements of individuals and orchestrate the way they move around their city and the way they essentially live, the things they do, the things they enjoy and the life they lead. So we're really kind of outsourcing our decision-making, I would say, to a huge corporate capitalist company, and there's something very, very scary about that indeed. All these technologies can be used to not only influence us to act as the perfect consumer, but also to prevent us from doing radical and revolutionary things. So technologies in foreign nations that have been used are things like heat map features which show where populations are gathering. In-game rewards can be offered to people to take different routes, things like that. Traffic data can be manipulated to prevent people gathering and protesting, as has happened in some of the authoritarian regimes across the world recently. So what we're looking at is not only a set of technologies which make people behave as ideal consumers, but ones which actually can be put to use to prevent radical and disruptive behaviour in the city, which limits the power of any kind of revolutionary force.
So, if you thought you had a private life, get used to it. You don't. And we're not going to reclaim our lives without a fight. I'm Tash, and you've been listening to Buccaneer, keeping the resistance informed. Keep listening, keep fighting, and remember, nobody owns you but you.
Counter-terrorism, counterintelligence, countering organized crime. Signal Intelligence Response leads the world in surveillance. It's great British technology protecting great British values. SIRS, watching over Britain, watching out for you.
This is London Calling. You're listening to Buccaneer, your pirate podcast source for what they don't need to know. I'm Tash, And this time we're giving a special shout out from us to the boys and girls at the Signal and Intelligence Response Service, better known as SIRS. Why not? They're going to be listening anyway. They're listening to everything. But don't worry, we're not going to say anything bad about a massive, unaccountable spy organisation that uses its powers to stifle dissent and shut down free speech. Instead, we're going to look at how SIRS became so powerful. And as usual, we'll keep everyone's names and locations secret, so SIRS doesn't come looking for them. Ian was a veteran political writer and podcaster back in the days of pre-crisis Britain.
Is the world we're living in now fascist? Well, this is what fascism is. It is the complete and total control of the individual. The desire to basically say to the individual, nothing in your life matters. On an individual basis, you are now part of the whole, part of the nation. And the only meaning that you will find in your life is to become part of the nation. What is a nation? A nation doesn't mean anything, right? The nation is basically just encapsulated by the leader that takes over, that claims that he, has this sort of access to the soul of the country, to the soul of the people. He never does, it's just a myth, but that's what they go for. On that basis, they take the right to control every aspect of your life, from who you talk to where you eat, to where you go to hang out with your friends. And what we're seeing now is a contemporary iteration of this process where you get corporations and the state operating in tandem, basically molded into one another. But that isn't that rare. I mean, it's exactly the same thing in Nazi Germany. You look at the concentration camps that operated in Nazi Germany, there were private companies in those camps making use of that slave labor. Fascism often works with corporations, and it's doing the same now. That's the way in which they track what you do. That's the way in which they track who you talk to. They operate as each other's proxies.
Charles is an expert in the dark arts of surveillance who worked to set up democratic media in post-communist states. How did it go so wrong in Britain?
We're looking at all the wrong things when we look at Britain's crisis. There's a lot of concentration on data and how that's been used and manipulated, and what we haven't looked at is the power structures and the profit that lies behind this. For example, if we examine what actually happened, there's a company that's really very interested in selling passports and making it easy to provide visas for investment and so on. And historically, throughout the world, they've been working with this big data manipulation company in order to overthrow governments. And then suddenly all the chickens came home to roost. Nobody could find any receipts for what was paid for. Nobody could figure out how things were done, but everybody had a feeling that something really stunk, and they couldn't figure it out. And yet it was standing there in their face the whole time. There's a couple of different ways that we got where it is that we are. I mean, one, you have a lot of smaller organizations, smaller power groups, companies as well, who are bending things just a little. We'll compromise a little bit, we'll bend the rules a little bit, and try to achieve what it is that we hope to achieve that's good for us. And if you add all of that up, what you end up with is a big wall moving in a big way, from a lot of little buttons being pushed. But also there's this other thing that's going on here, is the gathering of data and the analysis of data has authoritarianism contained within its DNA. It is by its nature a tool for authoritarianism, and it has been used in that way.
How does big data look into our lives? James covered it for the pre-crisis press.
We're starting to see the merger of private data and that with data held by the state into what are called social credit systems. This is where every aspect of your behaviour is monitored and totted up by a central system to sort of score you as a person, a bit like a credit card, but predicated on all of your behaviour rather than just the money you're spending. And this can have profound impact. We're starting to see systems emerge which will punish you and stop you from doing things in society based on your behaviours. And this can be as trivial as if you jaywalk, if you cross the road in the wrong place, you might lose points. If you do some community activities or help your neighbours, you might earn points. And then this can be used to sort of evaluate you as a person. And this could mean, for example, better travel privileges, being able to travel first class, or being denied from travelling first class to not being able to travel at all. These systems are very real and very possible because of all the data that is now held on us.
So if your ears are burning and you think someone might be watching you, you're probably right. They're watching all of us. I'm Tash, and you've been listening to Buccaneer. Keep listening, keep sharing the show, and keep it encrypted. They're watching us, but we're watching you too.
We live in modern times. Drones, robots, computer control, they all have their place. But so do people. And that place is us. Because when you need help, you need the human touch. Not robots, not soldiers, just people like you. The Metropolitan Police. People protecting people.
Welcome back to The Upload. Today we're talking about cryptocurrency. Crypto now seems like it's been around forever, but it's really quite a new invention. Were you an early adopter?
I was one of the first that was in this market. There seemed to be a new way of financial transactions, a new way of money. It's something that we could completely reinvent and change some of the legacy financial systems around the world and really give power back to the people.
Yeah, it was a real shift in the way that the world works. Let's recap the basics. So, central to cryptocurrency is the distributed ledger technology, the tech that keeps track of all transactions. And what this means is you can have a decentralized system without having to trust any one party, like old-fashioned banks.
One of the reasons why I got involved so early was that you could stay anonymous.
Yeah, the features of cryptocurrency very much fit into that early mindset. It was all about finding an alternative to centralized systems. It was kind of a countercultural punk ethos. The whole point of the distributed ledger is you're not trusting any one person to keep a track of who has what money or how they're spending it. It's all out there in the open for anyone to see, and yet you can remain secretive.
But not everybody now wants to keep up this crypto legacy. They don't share this attitude anymore. We've seen institutions, businesses, even governments experimenting with crypto, which doesn't really fit into its original radical counterculture mold.
Yeah, it's kind of weird today to think of people not using cryptocurrency. It's so mainstream now. You know, I'm almost nostalgic for the feel of cash. Good old-fashioned paper and coins. First they changed the paper notes to plastic notes, and now it's just all digital. There's nothing to hold on to.
It was great just to be able to have a little bit of money to carry around with you.
I think the turning point in the UK really came a few years ago when the pound dropped 10% over just one season. People living off grid started using crypto, and just as everyone was losing faith in the pound, they were gaining it in cryptocurrency, which turned out to be much more stable, kind of the opposite to what people thought in the beginning.
And then, of course, there was the recession. It didn't take long for startups to see an opportunity in this new way of doing finance. A lot of traditional money was converted to crypto, and it really shook up the financial sector.
Can you remember when they first introduced crypto cash points?
That was really sneaky. It was a classic startup behaviour. They just installed them everywhere. No consultation with the government, no approval or anything. But people immediately started to use them.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of how Bloom put out the Optic. They just made it free and flooded the streets with these devices. Suddenly everyone had them.
If there's this great option of tech, people are just going to start using it, no matter the cost.
Parliament actually tried to put a stop to the cash points, but people were using them so much already. There was outrage. I mean, some parts of London were already using crypto as their primary currency by then.
And now, apparently, or at least in theory, crypto is illegal.
Yeah, in May this year, economists found that crypto was being traded more than the pound, and banks were not happy. They basically forced the government to ban cryptocurrency in a last-ditch effort to save the pound.
But it's not like that's worked. People are still using crypto, and it's been pushed further, deeper underground. Things used to work fine with crypto, and it was just a peer-to-peer sharing economy-style system. Now it's all on the dark web and wrapped up again in organised crime.
Yeah, if you want to make something thrive on the black market, just make it illegal.
Here at Albion, we believe you can be the best. whoever you are. So if you're here illegally and are looking for a way to stay, for a way to make a difference, we are the way to make that happen. If you want to stop worrying and start enforcing, contact Albion. Signing bonus and citizenship sponsorship available. Albion. Great British values. Great British security.
This is London Calling. You're listening to me, Tash, on Buccaneer, your source for what they don't want you to know. This time we're turning our focus back on the media to look at my former employer, the GBB. As we know, the broadcaster has been through a lot of changes since the Hassani government gave in to pressure from its corporate backers and privatised the corporation. Today, the GBB is a shadow of its former self. It's become a tool used by the government to circulate fake news and misinformation. So how did we get here? Where did it all go wrong? How can we tell when our national media has become state propaganda? Our experts speak on conditions of anonymity for their own safety. Here's disinformation and media expert Charles, who's seen free broadcasters built up by journalists and torn down by demagogues all over the world.
So before the media fragmented, there was this voice of authority that was trusted and worthy of trust. Then what we ended up with is a really commercial model where whether you're talking about an app on a smart device or whether you're talking about a broadcaster, the most important thing was to keep you in that environment for the longest amount of time possible. And because that meant money in their pocket. And in order to do that, a couple of things happened. One was the use of manipulative techniques around behavioral economics, things that would just keep you scrolling or keep you listening or keep you looking for more information. The second is that that kind of environment favors sensationalism. And so you got more sensational headlines and more sensational stories, and it didn't matter whether they were true or not. It just kept people in, and it kept them in the loop. So we ended up in a situation where nobody trusted anything, and nobody believed anything at all. And that is the perfect environment for an authoritarian voice to come in and say, no, wait, we are the truth. So the ground for this environment really got created when we had suddenly authoritarian politicians everywhere, and anything that threatened them or they disagreed with, they would call it disinformation. That's disinformation, that's fake news. And again, we got in a situation where nobody really believed anything. And the trouble is if you were telling the truth, it's very hard to get your message to cut through all of the noise of all of the disinformation that's there. So like, you know, you remember Out on the Edges, there was this story about when they would take a house by force, they would take any infants and they would crucify them. And that's a great, fantastic, viral story. And how do you counter that story? With the truth. The only way you can counter it is by saying, no, they didn't. And of course, no one wants to spread that story. No one wants to hear that story. They want to hear the sensationalism. They want to hear how people were victims of violence when in fact they weren't. Or they were victims of insurgent forces when in fact they weren't.
The news isn't neutral, it's a battleground. Here's media researcher and academic Alfie.
The media has, of course, been perhaps the key way in which governments have controlled and influenced their populations. So, totalitarian countries have typically used huge mainstream media outlets to sell one kind of news, one kind of biased news to its population. Of course, the media has always played this kind of key role in methods of state control. I think what's happening now is perhaps even more concerning, where you previously, in pre-crisis Britain, we had perhaps more diverse voices in the media, but now with the GBB, you're really only seeing one brand of news and therefore only getting one truth. So people end up with a very biased and controlled idea of the reality and the world that we're actually living in. There was, of course, many concerns and many problems, but in a way there were some positive things that, like, not all information was coming from one place, and so you'd have kind of far-right media outlets developing and then left-wing media outlets developing to combat those and kind of challenge the mainstream newspapers, TV stations, radios, and make sure people were questioning the validity and truth of the information they were receiving. So whilst there was the digital afforded more fake information, it also makes us suspicious and sceptical of information and makes us question the information we're getting. And I think in pre-crisis Britain it might not have seemed great at the time, but there was something positive about that there was a lot of distrust in the media and in the different kinds of truths that are being told. Whereas now I think you're seeing a return to a more traditional and older pre-digital sense, actually, of people just trusting what they're told, and that's why we have to be here with radio stations like this to challenge those conceptions. Most citizens feel pretty hopeless, I think, and unable to fight back against these kind of huge mainstream corporations that simply entrench and support the ideals and ideologies of the state. It can seem very hopeless indeed, but I think, you know, the fact that you're out there listening, we're in here talking, shows that there is still a space to combat these false truths and disinformation that's being sold to us, and that it's never possible really to completely shut down, despite all the technologies that they have at their disposal and all the financial and corporate power and all the physical power. It's never quite possible to shut down people's desire to get to the truth and fight for their own ideologies and values, and you know, we're out here starting that task, so don't give up hope.
You've been listening to Buccaneer with me, Tash. We'll be back soon with more of what you'll never hear on the GBB. Keep listening, keep sharing, and keep resisting.
Albion, a legend, a truth, a reality. From the strength of King Arthur to the cunning and fairness of Robin Hood, this Green Isle has long told stories of those who stand for justice, whose strength protects those in need. The time of legends is past, but the values remain. Albion, great British values, great British security.
The bug, nibbling away on the rotting carcass of a once-free Britain.
Yum, yum.
Hello, Resistance fans. You're listening to the Bug Podcast, the objective voice of objection for this most objectionable world. I am Andy, not my real name, so good luck finding me, Monsieur Bloom. My real name is, in fact, Andrew, and I live in, note this down, a deluded pseudo-reality of my own making, which is, in fact, the most densely populated place on Earth these days. Overcrowded, some might say. Joining me, as always, my next-door neighbour in these Netherlands of nonsense. It's Alice.
Yes, indeed, it is Alice. Alice, who the bleep is Alice? I am not going to tell you that, but you can just sort of sense it from the timbre of my voice.
Let's spin the wheel and find out where we're getting today's news from. Here. It's coming from here. I must get a new wheel with at least one other place on it. And the headline today, Alice, our borders are safe. We can all sleep easy in our well-bordered beds. 4,000 illegals were deported last month. These illegal people breaking the law just by existing. And, of course, illegality is contagious. It can osmose through your skin just by standing next to an illegal person. So we've got rid of 4,000 of them. My question for you, Alice, is why only 4,000? Is that really enough? I will not feel safe until at least another 75 million people have been deported from this country, and I'm here in Britain on my own.
As a bleeding heart lefty, Andy, I would normally be outraged about this, but really I think mass deportation is a very handy way to break up with a partner. I'm sorry, baby, I love you, but an anonymous source has reported you for snoring really loudly in a French way.
So, everyone out. No exceptions, Alice, not even you. It's for the good of the country. Everyone out. Unless you can prove that your family are in the background on the Bayeux Tapestry cheering on King Harold at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. Get out! Actually, that's not British enough. Unless you can show, unarguably, that your direct bloodline is untainted by anything since before the Romans. Actually, scratch that. Unless your direct ancestor was personally responsible for building Stonehenge, get out of my country. I guess when you look at it, you know, the best way is to stop immigration, apart from, obviously, the end of the world, to make the place you want to stop people coming to as unpleasant as possible. So,
well, we absolutely are doing that, Andy.
Well, you know, fair play to the government for helping us with that. Another option, extend the White Cliffs of Dover. They've been resting on their laurels for too long. Very inefficient, it turns out, as a means of stopping immigration. We need to extend them by about another 11,000 miles, a full wrap around Great Britain, and they could do with being about 1.5 kilometres higher as well, with a special greasy coating to stop people clambering over the top or however they get in. Here's a quick joke for you, Alice, about the invasion. Did you hear the one about the woman who went into the immigration processing centre and was ever seen again?
No, Andy, I didn't hear that one.
Boom. Set up, punchline. Classic. For those of you unfamiliar with it, the Immigration Processing Centre is, of course, where so many of our guests to Britain go for a longer than desirable game of involuntary hide and seek. You are listening to the
Auto
Bar.
drive.
I reckon I deserve this. You look like I need oven mitts. You know, because you're hot. Oh, fuck. Let me start again.
Ooh, if that's how you treat a one-liner, I shudder to think of what you do with two. Goodbye.
All right, so you're in a bad mood. Been there. A drink usually helps.
Oh, I'm in a great mood, actually. It's just that I'm wasting my scant leisure time fending off the advances of a haggard swamp creature.
Fuck you!
Not even in your wildest dreams, sweetie.
I'm still learning the nuances of human interaction, but my analysis indicates that you aren't her type.
Thanks a lot for that, Bagley.
Quit your whining. There's plenty of fish in the sea, and we've got the biggest saltwater aquarium in town. At least one of our fish is bound to be fuckable.
Go on.
Just try some... Feeling ready to fight?
Let's do it. Hey, this is stupid, but did we match on Invite recently?
If we didn't, I'm going to have their CEO killed.
Well, actually, I was lying, but don't let that stop you.
Careful who you fib to. Someone almost died.
He's probably got it coming anyway.
I should say. Shall we move this conversation somewhere a bit more private?
Oh, my. Didn't know you could do that. What are you hiding? Oh, nothing that would interest you. Except maybe...
So after all that, did you acquire the biometric data?
Yeah, I got it. But to be honest, when I joined this resistance, I kind of pictured more Molotov cocktails and less of whatever the fuck that was.
Brilliant work. What now?
It seems you'll have to maintain the ruse a bit longer. The upload is still going and I have an incoming connection from the liaison.
Put her on.
Enough crap. Who the hell are you? You working for the Russians? China? Fucking America?
Whoa, if you don't want to see me again, just ghost me like a normal person.
Oh, do shut up.